How do you react when your only son gets married and you find out from his Instagram story? How do you sit there looking at a caption about the family that always supported me when you paid his tuition, his rent, and even the roof over his head? I did not write a comment under the photo. I called my lawyer instead. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Colin, and I fix things for a living. Not hearts, not big feelings. Wires, panels, systems. You press a switch, the lights come on. Most days, that is all people want from me. That morning started like any other workday. I reached the yard early, before the crew, while the sky was still gray. I unlocked the small metal gate, the same gate I had opened thousands of times, and walked into the office. The floor smelled like dust and coffee. Someone had left a half-finished sandwich on the reception desk from the night shift. The printer blinked with a red light in the corner, asking for paper. I put my lunch in the staff fridge and checked the schedule for the day. One team at the warehouse job, another at the tower block, and me at a smaller store refit. I liked days like that. Clear jobs, clear times, nothing special, just work. I made coffee in the chipped mug with my name on the side. The black letters had faded from too many washes, but you could still read them if you knew what they said. I sat down at the small round table in the break room and opened the newspaper on my phone. Sports, local news, a piece about the rising price of houses. I read it all slowly, in my usual order. The younger guys started to arrive, one by one. Boots on the floor, tools in hand, loud greetings in the hallway. They joked with each other in their fast way, talking about a game, a show, some online drama I did not follow. I heard a few names and brands I did not know, but I did not mind. I had stopped trying to keep up with that kind of thing years ago. I was halfway through my coffee when Liam, one of the youngest in the company, pushed open the break room door with his shoulder. He had his phone in his hand and a grin on his face. He was maybe 22, full of energy, always scrolling. He told me there was big news on social media and asked if I had seen it yet. He sounded excited, like he really expected me to be in on the joke or the celebration. I put my cup down and asked what he meant. He said my son finally did it and that the photos were everywhere that morning. He held his phone out toward me, screen bright, and asked if I was proud. For a second, I thought maybe it was a promotion. Alex worked in an office now. I did not fully understand what he did, but I knew he wore a tie and sat in front of a computer. Maybe he had passed some exam or gotten some certificate. That was the kind of thing he mentioned the last time we spoke in person. I reached for the phone. My hand felt slow, heavy, like I had been working in the cold. On the screen, Instagram was open. A square photo filled most of it. My son stood there in a light gray suit, smiling at the camera. His arm was around Jenna, his partner. She had a white dress on, not huge, not classic, but clearly a wedding dress. On one side of them stood Roger and Elaine, her parents, both in formal clothes. On the other side, there was nobody. The photographer had framed it that way, I could tell. A clean family line, 4 people together. They were standing under a simple arch with flowers. There were chairs and lights and people in the blurred background. It was a wedding. There was no doubt. My throat felt dry. I stared at the picture for a few long seconds. Then my eyes moved down. Under the photo, there was a caption that Alex had written. It said that he was finally standing with the family that always supported him. It said he was grateful to the people who were there for him every step of the way. There were heart emojis and ring emojis and a line about new beginnings. Liam laughed and told me that the photos were everywhere, that even his girlfriend had shared them. He thought I had already seen everything. He told me that the suit looked good on my son and that the wedding looked expensive. I managed a small smile. I said something about how it looked nice. I said it must have been a good day for them. I did not tell him it was the first time I heard about the wedding, the first time I saw that dress, that arch, that caption. Another coworker leaned over his shoulder and joked that I must have had a front row seat. I said it had been busy. I did not explain what that meant. It was easier to let them think I had chosen not to talk about it than to admit I had not even been invited. They drifted out of the room, talking about the flowers, the car in the background, the guest list they thought they recognized from other posts. I sat there with my coffee and looked at the photo again on my own phone now. Alex's hair was a little shorter than the last time I saw him. He looked older, but also lighter, like a weight had dropped from his shoulders. For a moment, I thought maybe there had been some mistake. Maybe he had called and I had missed it. Maybe the invitation got lost in the mail. So I opened our message thread and scrolled. Our last chat was from 3 weeks before, a quick line about him being too busy to meet for dinner and a promise to find another day. He did not mention wedding planning. He did not mention a date. He did not mention anything. I checked my call history. No missed calls, no voice messages from his number. Just the same simple pattern from the last year. Him reaching out when he needed something practical, me offering to help, him turning down the offer with polite words, then silence. I finished my coffee even though it tasted bitter and cold now. Work did not care about my feelings. The warehouse still needed its lights. The store still needed its panels. I stood up, rinsed my mug, and got on with the day. In the van, on the way to the first site, I could not stop seeing that caption in my mind. The family that always supported me. It was a strange sentence when you knew who had paid what, who had given up what. I tried to push it away. I told myself that online words were just decoration. People wrote things for likes, for image. I told myself that I knew the truth, and that had to be enough. At lunch, the team split. 2 of the guys went to a burger place. I said I would just grab a coffee in the nearby shop and meet them later. I needed a quieter place, somewhere I could hear my own thoughts. The coffee shop near the site was small and bright. A bell rang when I walked in. There were plants near the window and chalk writing on the wall with the day's offers. A student couple sat in the corner with laptops. A woman with a stroller waited in line. I ordered a simple black coffee and took a seat near the back. I told myself I would just drink it and scroll through some news. Instead, I ended up back on Instagram. I checked Alex's profile. There were more photos. One of the ring, one of Jenna laughing with her friends, one of Roger and Alex together, arms around each other, both smiling at the camera. Under that, there was another caption about the man who had taught him what real stability looked like. I put the phone face down on the table. My heart was beating a little faster now, but my face stayed calm. Years on job sites had trained me to hold a neutral expression even when things went wrong. You do not panic while standing under a heavy cable. You do not panic when a client yells. You breathe, and you fix things. I picked the phone up again when it buzzed. This time it was a video someone had shared in a group chat. A coworker had forwarded it. He wrote that the speeches were good and that the food looked amazing. I tapped it open. The video started with music and laughter. Someone walked across a decorated room with their phone, then the image settled on a small stage area. Roger stood there with a glass in his hand. Alex and Jenna sat at a table in front of him, her dress bright under the lights. Roger began to speak. The sound was a little fuzzy, like most phone videos, but clear enough. He talked about how Alex came into their lives. He said that from the moment he met him, he knew he needed a steady hand and a real role model. He said he had tried his best to be the father figure Alex never had. People clapped and laughed when he said that line. Some guests looked toward Jenna with smiles. You could hear chairs scrape and glasses clink. He went on about how proud he was to stand there as the man who watched Alex grow into a responsible, successful adult. He talked about never missing important moments, always showing up, always being there. He thanked Jenna's mother for opening their home and their hearts. He called their relationship proof that real family is not about biology, but about who shows up for you. At the table, Alex nodded and smiled, his face soft. He did not look embarrassed or uneasy. He looked like a man who agreed. The video ended with everyone raising their glasses to Roger. The camera turned briefly and caught Alex hugging him. Then it cut off. I watched the video twice. The second time, I focused on the background. I looked for my face, thinking maybe there was some small angle where I had slipped into the frame somehow, like a ghost. There was nothing. Only the Blakes, friends, co-workers from Alex's office, and people I did not know. When the video finished, it went back to the chat window. Under it, someone had written that this was how real fathers behaved, and that Roger was a model parent. Another person replied with a string of praise emojis. I sat there in the coffee shop with the cup in my hand. The liquid was almost gone, just a brown line at the bottom. The student couple in the corner laughed softly over something on their screen. The barista wiped the counter and started a fresh pot. Cars passed outside the window. Time moved in its usual slow way. Inside my chest, there was a strange quiet. Not a storm, not a sudden burst. Just a slow change, like a dimmer switch moving. The story my son told the world about his life did not match the one I had lived. For years, I had told myself it was just a phase, that he was busy, that he would grow out of it. Now I was watching the final version of that story being fixed in place in front of dozens of people and hundreds of screens. I did not cry. I did not crash my cup down or leave in a hurry. I finished the last sip of coffee, stood up, put the cup in the bin, and walked out into the street. My hands were steady when I took my phone out again. On the top of the screen, a small icon showed a reminder for the next morning. It was my yearly meeting with Ms. Patel, my lawyer, about the family trust and the property held in it. I had almost forgotten it was coming up. Now, for the first time, I looked at that reminder with full attention. When I got home that evening, the house felt smaller than usual. It was quiet, just the low hum of the fridge and the faint ticking of the wall clock in the hallway. I took off my work boots, lined them up by the door, and walked into the kitchen. There were 2 plates in the cupboard, 2 cups, 2 bowls. I only ever used one, but I kept the second set because once, years ago, I used to set a place for my son at my table. I stood there with my hand on the plate for a moment, then I put it back and filled a glass with water instead. I sat at the little kitchen table and looked at my hands. There were small scars on the fingers from years of work. I remembered when those same hands had turned pages of school books, tied shoelaces, cut food into small bites for a boy with messy hair and big eyes who laughed at my bad jokes. Back then, I lived in a small rented apartment across town. It was not much. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a narrow living room with a secondhand sofa. But on the weekends when I had Alex, it felt like the center of the world. On Friday nights, I would hurry from a late shift straight to the station, pick him up from his mother's place, and carry his small backpack myself. We would stop at the store and let him pick one treat. Sometimes it was ice cream, sometimes it was a cheap toy car from a bin near the cashier. He would talk the whole way back. School stories, games, whatever was in his head. I listened to every word. In that old kitchen, I learned how to cook simple meals for a child. Pasta with sauce, eggs and toast, pancakes on Sunday mornings when I was not too tired. There was a wobbly table against the wall with 2 chairs. I would sit across from him while he ate, ask about his teachers, his friends, what he liked and what he did not. He liked drawing. I still remember his small hand holding crayons, pressing too hard on the paper, telling me that one picture was a rocket and another was a house. Every time he drew a house, he colored the roof bright red. I always asked who lived inside. Sometimes he said it was all of us together. Sometimes he said it was just him and his mom. Sometimes just him and me. The divorce came when he was still young. We did not shout in front of him. We tried to keep the worst of it out of his ears. But children feel things anyway. They feel the tension in the air, the pauses, the way adults avoid certain words. I still remember the family court hallway the first day we went to settle support and custody in front of a judge. The walls were dull and the chairs were metal. Other families sat there too, some arguing in low voices, some looking away from each other. I wore my only good shirt. My ex-wife Tessa wore a neat blouse and held a folder in her hands. Alex was not there. He was at school that day. That was part of the point. We were there to decide when he would be with me and when he would be with her, as if a child could be measured in weekends and holidays and alternating years. The judge looked at our papers, at my income, at hers, at the list of expenses. I agreed to the support amount without much fight. It was high for my salary at the time, but I did not argue. I just asked that my time with Alex be clear and regular. I wanted him to know when he would be with me so he could count on it. When we walked out into the hallway, Tessa made a small sound like a sigh. She said that at least the money would help keep things stable for Alex. She said she hoped I would not fall behind. She did not say thank you. I did not ask for it. For years after that, I paid on time. I took extra jobs in the evenings. I did emergency call-outs on weekends when other electricians wanted to rest. I carried ladders up stairwells at midnight so that a supermarket could open with working lights the next day. Some months, after support and rent and bills, there was almost nothing left. But Alex had shoes that fit, and a full lunchbox and school trips he could join. When he came to my place, I did what I could with what I had. I repaired a second-hand desk so he had somewhere to do his homework. I painted one wall his favorite color. I bought a small second-hand TV so he could watch cartoons in the evening. He never complained about the size of the apartment or the old sofa. Children accept things as they are when the people around them seem calm. Later, when Tessa moved into a nicer condo after meeting her new partner, the difference between our homes started to show. Her place had a large living room, a balcony, new furniture. The first time I went there to pick Alex up, I felt like I was walking through a magazine page. In her living room, there was a glass table and white chairs. A flat-screen TV hung on the wall. Alex ran around showing me his new room, his new bed, the view from his window. I smiled and said it all looked great. I meant it. He seemed happy. But the handovers started to feel different. Sometimes I would be 5 minutes late because of traffic or a job that ran over. Tessa would stand with her arms crossed, making little comments about how busy I always seemed to be. She would say that at least Alex could count on her to be there on time. She never raised her voice, but she said it in front of him. Other times, I would arrive early and wait in the hallway, only for them to come down 10 or 15 minutes later. When I suggested we try to stick to the agreed time so Alex would not be confused, she would say I was making a fuss over nothing, that he understood who really kept his life in order. It was death by 1,000 small remarks. Never one big, clear attack. Just a slow drip of ideas around him, that she was the stable one, that her new partner was reliable and present, that I was trying but always somehow falling short. As Alex grew older, his schedule filled up. School events, sports, friends' parties. More and more often, I got messages saying he could not make our planned weekend because of something with his friends or something at his mother's home. I did not want to be the parent who made him choose, so I stepped back. I told myself it was normal, that teenagers pull away, that he would come back when he was ready. When he started college, I was proud. I had helped pay the application fees. I had taken extra shifts again so I could send him money for books and rent. He chose to live closer to his mother's side of town, where the trains and buses were more frequent. That made sense. I told him I understood. The first time he asked for help with rent, because his part-time job hours had been cut, I did not hesitate. I transferred the money that same day. He wrote back that I did not have to, that he would pay me back. I told him not to worry about it. He never did pay it back, but that was not why I helped him. He was my son. Around that time, I met with Ms. Patel, the lawyer, and started the trust. I had seen too many people my age reach the end of their working years with nothing to show for it except worn knees and tired backs. I wanted to build something that could last beyond me, a house for Alex, held safe, so he would always have a roof even if life went wrong. We chose a modest property in a good area. Not big, not fancy, but solid. Good wiring, good pipes, good light. I trusted those more than granite counters. The trust bought it, under my control as trustee, with clear conditions about use and respect. At the time, I did not think about those clauses much. They were just lines in a document the lawyer said were standard and wise. When Alex finished college and needed a place to live, I offered him that house. I did not tell him every detail about the trust. I simply said I had something set up to help him, that he could live there at a very low rent as long as he treated it well and stayed in touch. He seemed unsure at first, then happy. Moving in gave him independence without too much pressure. That house became the base for his new life. He brought Jenna there when they started dating. He called me once to ask if he could repaint the bedroom walls. I said yes, as long as he used good paint and took care of the floors. He laughed and said he knew I would say that. The first time I met Jenna's parents was at Tessa's condo. Alex wanted a neutral place where everyone could be in the same room. I dressed in my best shirt again, the same one from the court hallway, just older. Roger shook my hand and smiled in a way that felt polite but distant. He asked what I did. When I said I ran a small electrical company, he nodded and said it was good that people like me kept things running behind the scenes. Then he talked at length about his own agency, his clients, his meetings abroad. Elaine asked a few questions about my work schedule, then turned to Tessa to talk about a charity event. When conversation moved to Alex and Jenna, the Blakes praised how driven he was, how smart, how well he fit in with their friends. They said it was nice that he had finally found stable support around him. Tessa gave a small smile and said something about how it had not always been easy when Alex was younger. She did not say that support payments had always arrived on time. She did not say who had stayed late in cold rooms to earn them. I sat quietly and listened. Alex seemed at ease with them. He laughed at their stories, nodded when they spoke about values and image and building a good name. When I spoke, he listened, but his eyes drifted back to them often. I could see the gravity in the room. Money, status, smooth words. It pulls, even without meaning to. Looking back, that night was the start of a slow rewrite of the story. In small social circles, at dinners and gatherings I was not invited to, a new version of Alex's past formed. One where his mother and her side had carried the real weight. One where the Blakes stepped in as the first true steady support in his adult life. My role became a footnote, then a shadow, then nothing. I did not fight it. I kept working. I kept paying. I kept answering his calls when he needed advice about a bill or a repair. I told myself that love is not a contest, that keeping score only poisons you. Sitting in my kitchen that night, after seeing the wedding photos and the caption, I realized that while I was not keeping score, others had been. They had written the scoreboard in public, and in their version, I was not even on the field. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For a moment, I lay there in the half-dark, listening to the quiet. The image of Alex in his suit came back at once, like it had been waiting behind my eyes all night. The caption floated over it in my mind, clear and sharp. The family that always supported me. I sat up, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and rubbed my face with both hands. My body felt tired, but not from work. Work tired is simple. You rest, it passes. This was a different kind of weight. I made coffee and toast without really tasting either. The routine carried me from room to room. Switch on the kettle, open the bread bag, check the weather through the small kitchen window. It was cold outside, but bright. The kind of morning where the air is clear and people hurry along the street with their collars up. I had taken the day off in advance for the trust meeting with Ms. Patel. At the time, it had just been a date on the calendar. Now it sat there like a marker on a map I had not meant to draw. After breakfast, I picked up my phone and saw a new message. It was from Alex. He wrote that he hoped I was not upset about the wedding. He said it had been a very small event, mainly for Jenna's side, and that things had been rushed with planning. He said it had all moved fast and that they did not want drama between families, so they had kept it simple. He also said that social media could make things look bigger than they really were, and asked me not to read too much into the captions. He added a smiley face at the end, like a soft cushion under hard words. I read it 2 or 3 times. No apology for not telling me, no. I wish you had been there. Just careful phrases that moved guilt around like pieces on a board. I typed a reply and erased it twice before I sent anything. In the end, I wrote that I hoped the day had been good for them, that I wished them well, and that I would like to meet them both soon to give my congratulations in person. I said nothing about the caption or the speech or the part where I had found out at the same time as strangers. He wrote back a short answer. He said maybe they could arrange something later when things calmed down. He said Jenna's parents were very busy and that the next weeks were full. There was no date, no suggestion, only that later would be better. Later. A nice, soft word that can stretch forever if you let it. I put the phone down on the table and looked at it for a long moment. Then I got up and went to the small bedroom I used as a home office. The room was simple, a desk, a chair, a small bookshelf, and a metal filing cabinet in the corner. On the wall above the desk, there was a cheap calendar with a mountain picture. The date of the meeting with Ms. Patel was circled in blue pen. I opened the top drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside were old invoices, supplier contracts, vehicle papers for the company vans, all the usual life documents. I pulled out the lower drawer instead, the one I did not open very often. In that drawer, there was one thick folder with the name of the family trust written in black marker across the front. Under it was another folder with house purchase documents. I lifted the trust folder out and set it on the desk. For a few seconds, I just looked at it. The paper edges were slightly worn, the way they get when you carry them to meetings and then back again. Years ago, when we first set it up, I had read every page with care. Since then, I had trusted Ms. Patel to keep track of details. I liked simple rules. I followed them. Now, I opened the folder and flipped through the pages slowly. I did not read every legal sentence. I did not need to. I knew the main points already. The trust owned the house. I was the trustee. Alex was the named main beneficiary with conditions. If he met those, he could one day take full ownership. If he did not, I had the power to act in other ways. We had written those conditions to cover serious problems. Addiction, crime, long-term neglect. At least, that was what I remembered. Ms. Patel had also talked about another idea, something about not supporting someone who publicly turned their back on the person who had helped them. At the time, I had nodded, thinking it was unlikely to come up. Life had seemed more simple back then. I closed the folder without going deeper. Not yet. I placed it back on the desk, on top of the other papers. It looked heavier there than it had in the drawer. My phone rang. For a second I thought it might be Alex calling. His name did not appear on the screen often these days. But it was another name, Nora. My sister's voice came through the line, warm and steady, as always. She worked in a hospital and was used to speaking calmly even when people were in pain. She asked if I had seen the photos. Someone at her work had shown them to her on their phone, thinking she had already been at the wedding. I said yes. I had seen them. I tried to keep my voice even. Old habit. She was quiet for a moment, then said that she was sorry I had found out that way. She said she did not understand why he had not told me, or why Tessa had not at least sent a message. She said it was not right. I heard sounds in the background at her end. A distant announcement, the soft beep of a machine, life going on. She lowered her voice a little and said that she had heard something else too. She said that at the hospital, one of her colleagues knew Jenna's mother. They had talked about the wedding in the staff room earlier that week. In that conversation, it had come up that Alex and Jenna were so lucky to have the Blakes helping them get their house. People were saying that Roger had bought it for them, or at least put up most of the money. Nora said she had kept quiet when she heard that. She did not want to correct a stranger at work, but when she heard the word gift, she had felt something twist inside her, because she knew who had paid for that house. She knew whose tiring years and tightened belts had gone into it. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. The paint had a small crack in one corner. I had meant to fix it. Other things had always felt more urgent. I told Nora that the house was under the trust, that I still owned it on paper. I reminded her of the day I had signed the documents, how we had gone to a cheap diner after, and she had teased me for reading every line twice. She remembered. She said softly that this meant I had options, that I did not have to just sit and watch as other people took credit for what I had built. She said she would support whatever I decided, whether that meant doing nothing or doing something. After we hung up, I sat there for a while with the phone in my hand. The sun had moved a little higher in the sky. A thin stripe of light came in through the blinds and lay across the trust folder like a line on the floor. I checked the time. My meeting with Ms. Patel was not until later in the morning. I still had a couple of hours. I stood up, put on my jacket, and took my car keys from the hook near the door. Instead of driving straight into the city, I turned the other way, toward the neighborhood where Alex lived. The streets there were lined with trees, the houses were similar in size, mostly 2 stories, with small front gardens. When I had chosen that property, I had liked the feeling of the area. Calm, not too far from public transport. A good place to start a life. I drove slowly past the row of houses until I saw his. I had been there a few times in the early days, helping carry boxes, tightening a loose rail, checking a strange noise in the boiler. It looked different now. There were fresh plants in the front yard, arranged in careful lines, a new mailbox with their 2 last names printed together. Lights along the path that would glow in the evening. The front door was painted a brighter color than before. It looked like someone had worked hard to make it picture-ready. There were cars parked outside. One I recognized as Alex's. Another looked like Roger's. A third I did not know. The curtains were open. I could see movement inside, a figure crossing the hallway. On the side of the house, there were strings of lights hanging in the backyard. A small arch stood near the back fence, decorated with fabric and flowers that still looked fresh. It seemed they had brought a piece of the wedding home. I parked a little down the street and sat there in the car for a few minutes. I watched as a neighbor walked by and waved toward the house. Someone opened the door, waved back, and laughed. Music played faintly from inside. In that moment, I saw the life they were building, brick by brick, decoration by decoration, all resting on a foundation they believed was theirs. A house with a story that began, in their minds, with the Blakes' help and the strength of their new family image. I knew another version of that story. The nights of overtime, the long drives back from distant jobs, the missed outings, the stack of receipts and bank slips, the quiet meeting in a lawyer's office when I signed the papers to make sure my son would never worry about a roof. I started the car again and pulled away before anyone at the house looked out and saw me. I did not want a scene in the street. Not now, not in front of neighbors who had already heard one version of who I was. On the way to Ms. Patel's office, traffic moved slowly. People changed lanes without signaling, rushed through yellow lights. None of it bothered me. My thoughts were somewhere else. I thought of that caption again. The family that always supported me. I thought of the speech about real fathers. I thought of people at the wedding laughing, raising their glasses. I imagined them picturing some absent man who never paid, who never showed up. A vague figure who did not matter. In their version of the story, I had already been removed. Life had moved on without me. That was the part that stuck. Not just that I had been replaced, but that I had been erased. The car clock showed I was on time. I turned into the small parking lot near Ms. Patel's building, found a spot, and sat for a moment with the engine off. The trust folder lay on the passenger seat beside me. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, then opened the door and stepped out into the cool air. Ms. Patel's office was on the 3rd floor of an older building in the center of town. The hallway outside smelled like paper and cleaner. The carpet was a little worn in the middle where people passed all day. I had walked down that hallway many times before for other meetings with her, but this time my steps felt different, heavier. Her assistant greeted me at the front desk and asked how I was. I said I was fine, that it was good to see them. My voice sounded normal to my own ears, and that was enough. She told me Ms. Patel was finishing a call and asked me to wait in the small conference room. The conference room was simple. A long table, 8 chairs, a glass jug of water, and a shelf with files in neat rows. A large window looked out over the street. From there, I could see people crossing the road, a bus stopping, a cyclist waiting at the light, everyone in their own little world. I set the trust folder on the table and sat with my hands resting on it. When Ms. Patel came in, she gave me a firm handshake and a small smile. She had the same calm, focused air she always carried. She said it was good to see me and hoped business was going well. I said the company was steady, that work was still coming in. After a few polite lines, she sat across from me and opened her notebook. She reminded me that this was our annual review of the trust and asked if anything major had changed in my plans since the last time we met. I hesitated for a moment, then told her there was something new. I said that my son had just married. She brightened and said that this was big news and that she hoped it had been a joyful day. I held her gaze and told her I had found out from social media the morning after. I explained in simple order what had happened. I told her about the photo with the caption about the family that always supported him. I explained that the family in the picture did not include me, that it showed only my son, his wife, and her parents. I told her about the speech at the reception that praised another man as the only real father figure my son ever had. I told her how the guests had cheered at that line, and how people now talked about the house as if it had been a gift from the Blakes. I spoke slowly, not adding color, not changing the facts. I watched her face as I talked. She did not interrupt. She did not try to comfort me with quick phrases. She listened, pen still, eyes steady. When I finished, she nodded once and asked a few questions. She asked if I had screenshots of the posts and videos. Oh, I said I did. She asked if I had any written records of my support for Alex over the years. I said there were bank statements, court payment records, and emails. She said those would be useful if I decided to change anything in the trust. She pulled out her copy of the documents from her bag and opened them on the table. We went through the structure again, point by point, in plain language. She reminded me that the trust, not Alex, owned the house. She reminded me that I was the trustee with full control and that Alex was a main beneficiary with conditions attached. She pointed to the sections that described when he could gain full ownership and when he could lose his place in the trust. One part in particular, she said, was important now. It was the clause about ongoing respect and connection. She explained that we had included it years ago to prevent a situation where someone took the benefits and then turned around and wrote the grantor out of their life in public. At the time, it had felt almost theoretical. Now, it was not. She said that the law could not force a child to love or like a parent. Feelings were not something courts handled, but the law could decide where property went and under what rules. That part, she said, was clear and solid. She did not tell me what to do. That was not her way. Instead, she laid out the options. She said I could do nothing, leave things as they were, ignore the posts and speeches, and let Alex stay in the house as if nothing had happened. She said I had every right to be generous if I chose it. She also said that, under the trust terms and with the evidence I had, I was within my rights to change the arrangement. As trustee, I could remove him as beneficiary, redirect the property, or even sell it. She said such steps would have to follow proper notice periods and procedures, but they were possible. She asked how I felt about all of this. Not what I thought, but how I felt. I sat there for a long moment and tried to find the right words. I told her I was not looking for revenge. I said that if my son had simply pulled away over time, if he had chosen another life quietly, I could have accepted that. Children move on, they build new families, parents fade into the background, that is part of life. What I could not accept, I said, was being used and then publicly erased. Years of support, years of effort, turned into a story where someone else stepped into my place and took not just the present, but the past as well. I said I could not support that version of the truth with my own work and savings. She nodded and said she understood. She said that what I described was not just hurt feelings, but a deep break of trust. She said the trust documents had been written for exactly this kind of situation, even if we had not fully believed we would face it. She asked if I was ready to start gathering and organizing the records. She said no decision had to be made that minute, but that it was wise to get everything in order while the details were fresh. I said yes. We made a list together. On one side of her notebook, she wrote down what we would need: payment records, messages, photos, screenshots, any written proof of the story as I had lived it. On the other side, she wrote down what the other side had put into the world: the posts, the speech, the comments. She said that the law liked things clear and calm, no emotion, just records. When the meeting ended, she said that whatever choice I made, she would support it fully as long as it stayed inside the rules. She reminded me that I did not have to rush, but also that letting things slide could make them harder to handle later. I walked out of the building feeling heavier in some ways, but lighter in others. My feelings were still there, but now they sat within a simple frame: options, steps, choices. At home, I took off my jacket and went straight to the home office. The trust folder went back on the desk. Beside it, I placed a stack of plain folders I had picked up from a supply store on the way home. I liked things labeled. It helped me think. I started with the easy part, the bank statements. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out the long row of envelopes from the court and from my bank. I laid them out on the desk in rough time order. Then I opened each one, checked the dates, and placed them into a folder I labeled Support. Next came the emails. I sat at the computer and searched my inbox for Alex's name and for the word rent. I found messages from years back where he had asked for help with a payment or a course fee. In one, he had written that he did not know what he would do without my help. In another, he had said he would make me proud. I read them slowly, then printed copies and placed them in a folder marked Education and Rent. Then I opened my banking app and downloaded export files of transfers to his accounts, especially in the early years of his adult life. I printed those too. Rows of numbers, dates, and short notes like books or deposit. To someone else, they might look boring. To me, they were a timeline of choices. After that, I turned to the digital side. I took out a small USB drive from the desk drawer and plugged it into the computer. I made a new folder on it labeled with the year. On my phone, I opened the screenshots I had taken of the wedding posts, the photo with the caption, the shot of Alex and Roger, arms around each other, the group chat video of the speech. I sent them to my email and then saved them on the computer, then onto the USB drive. I named each file with a simple description and the date. I did the same with older photos and messages where Alex had talked about his life, his needs, his thanks. Those went into another folder on the USB drive. I wanted everything in one place, easy to find. By the time I finished that first round, the desk was covered with piles. Support records here, education and rent there, house purchase documents on one side, digital files backed up on the small silver stick in front of the keyboard. It did not make me feel better in a warm way. I did not expect it to, but it gave shape to the years. What had once been a blur of effort now sat in front of me in neat stacks. The story did not live only in my memory anymore. It lived on paper too. As I was putting clips on some of the piles, I heard a key turn in the front door. For a moment I tensed, then I remembered that I had given Nora a spare key long ago, after a break-in scare on the street. I had forgotten to tell her about the day off, but clearly she had chosen a good time anyway. She called out a greeting as she stepped in and took off her shoes. I told her I was in the office. She walked in a moment later, her hospital bag over one shoulder, tired lines under her eyes. She looked at the desk, at the folders with labels, at the open trust file. She did not make a joke about my need for order, like she sometimes did. Instead, she let out a slow breath and said that it seemed I had started. I said yes. My voice was calm, maybe even a bit flat. I told her what Ms. Patel and I had discussed in simple terms. I said we were just at the stage of gathering and arranging, not yet moving. Nora came closer and touched the top of one folder gently. She said it was strange how a whole part of a person's life could fit into a few stacks of paper. Then she corrected herself and said that this was only the visible part, the part that mattered to offices and courts. The rest, she said, still lived in stories and memories. I nodded and said that the courts would not care about how my son laughed over pancakes at that old kitchen table. They would care about numbers and signatures. She said that was true, but that those numbers and signatures would at least make a clear line between what really happened and what people liked to say had happened. We stood there in silence for a short time, both looking at the desk. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the computer and a faint sound of a car passing outside. She asked if I knew yet what I wanted to do. I said I was not fully sure. I only knew that doing nothing no longer felt honest. I said that I could not keep pretending that the story other people told did not matter, not when that story now sat under photos and speeches and jokes. Nora nodded and said that whatever I did, I should make sure I could live with it in 10 years. She said that was the only test that mattered. She reminded me gently that being fair to myself was not the same as being cruel to others, no matter what some people might later claim. After she left, I went back into the office and stared at the folders once more. My hands rested on the back of the chair. My tools in this room were paper and patience, not wire and pliers. For the first time, I saw that clearly. The next days passed in a way that felt both slow and very clear. I worked my usual hours. I drove the vans. I checked panels and breakers. I answered clients' questions. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, something had settled into place. Not anger, not panic, just a steady line from one step to the next. One afternoon, an email came in from a name I did not know. The subject line mentioned the property address. I opened it at my desk in the home office. The writer was a real estate agent, recommended by Ms. Patel. His name was Lewis Grant. He wrote that he had been told I might want to discuss options for a house that was held in a trust. He asked if we could meet at his office to talk through the market and possible next steps. His tone was neutral. No pressure, no friendly jokes, just clear information. I liked that. I replied that I was free the next morning. His office was on a corner near a busy street. The windows had photos of houses with small lines of text under each one. I pushed the door open and heard a bell. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and printed paper. Mr. Grant came from a back room with a folder in his hand. He was around my age, maybe a little younger, with a careful, steady way of moving. He shook my hand and offered me a seat. In a small conference space with clear chairs and a round table. He started by asking simple questions. Was I the trustee? Was the property currently occupied? How much time did I have in mind if I decided to sell? I answered each one in turn. He pulled out a sheet with recent sales in the same area. He showed me how prices had moved over the last 2 years. The numbers were higher than I had expected. The house I had bought as a stretch now sat in a very strong position. He explained that places like that, in that kind of neighborhood, did not stay on the market long when priced fairly. He asked why I was considering selling. I told him only what he needed to know, that the house was part of a family arrangement that no longer matched the reality of how that family behaved, that the trust gave me the right to act to protect its purpose, that I wanted to make sure what I had built did not support a false story about who had been there and who had not. He did not dig into the emotional side. I appreciated that. He just nodded and said that, from a property point of view, it was straightforward. If the trust owned it, and I had authority as trustee, we could proceed once my lawyer confirmed the exact steps. We walked through the process: listing, viewings, offers, notice periods, move-out times. Each step had a simple line next to it. It was like a wiring diagram. Follow the path, check each point twice, do not skip connections. He asked if there were tenants, and if so, what kind of agreement they had. I told him that my son and his wife lived there, and that the arrangement was informal, under the trust. I said there was no long written lease to worry about, just the trust terms and the law's basic rules about notice. He made a note and said that, in that case, communication would go through me and Ms. Patel. He said he would not speak directly with them unless and until it was needed and proper. There was no hint of gossip in his voice, just a simple, professional plan. At the end of the meeting, he slid a short form across the table. It was a standard agreement to let him act as the agent. I read it carefully, line by line, the way I always did. Then I signed and dated it. He said he would prepare a draft listing and send it to me for approval. When I stepped back out onto the street, the sky was overcast. People walked fast, collars up. I walked to a nearby bank branch to deal with the next part. Ms. Patel had set an appointment with a trust officer there. The meeting room they used was small, with a table, 2 chairs, and a screen on the wall showing the bank's logo. The officer was a quiet woman with glasses and a neat notebook. She checked my identification and the trust details. Then she spoke through the options in calm, formal language. The trust could sell the property. The proceeds could stay in the trust and be redirected to other listed beneficiaries or new ones, depending on updated instructions. The bank did not judge reasons. It only checked that papers were in order. She reminded me that any change had to be signed by me as trustee and reviewed by Ms. Patel. She showed me where my signature would go on future forms, then closed the file. Nothing had to be signed at that exact moment, she said. But when the time came, the bank was ready. On my way home, my phone buzzed. A message from Nora appeared. She had taken a short break at the hospital and wanted to check how the meetings went. I told her, in simple phrases, that it was all possible, that the path was clear. She did not push for details. She just sent back a single line. Do what feels true to your work. That night, at my kitchen table, I sat with a notepad and tried to imagine what true to my work meant in this context. In my job, when a system is wired wrong, you do not pour more power into it and hope it sorts itself out. You shut it down, you trace the lines, and you fix the roots. If someone has twisted cables the wrong way on purpose, you do not leave it that way for the next person to deal with. You correct it. You label it properly. The next week moved in a quiet but steady rhythm. I got emails from Mr. Grant with photos of the house from past sales. He said he would need updated pictures. I told him I did not want to disturb the people inside yet. He said we could use neutral outside shots for initial interest, then schedule viewings once things were official. We talked about timing. He said there were buyers already looking in that area, with financing approved and ready. He predicted that if the price was fair, we would have serious interest within days. At the same time, Ms. Patel and I spoke again. We met once more in her office, this time with fewer questions and more decisions. She had gone over the trust documents again and confirmed that the clause about ongoing respect and contact was strong enough to act on. She had already drafted notices that could be sent when I gave the word. She kept the drafts in a folder in her bag. I did not read them then. I did not need to see every word. What mattered to me was that they were written in formal, cold language. No emotion, just terms and dates. The opposite of a warm caption or a cheerful speech. A few days later, Mr. Grant called with news. He said he had spoken quietly with a couple who had been looking for months. He had mentioned there might soon be a house like the one they wanted, in the right area, if they were patient and respectful of some timing needs. They were very interested. They had jobs, financing, and no chain to slow things down. I told him to move ahead. We agreed that he would show them the house once we had the legal start point set. In the meantime, he would prepare the contract on his side and send it to Ms. Patel to review. At home, my desk grew more ordered, not less. The piles of documents turned into neat folders that now felt less like a collection and more like a toolkit. Support. Education. House. Public story. The USB drive stayed in a small box in the top drawer, easy to reach. One evening, as I was tidying the living room, my phone vibrated with a noise I did not see often anymore. The sound of a group chat message in the extended family thread. I wiped my hands and picked it up. Someone had shared a digital invitation. It was a design with soft colors and a sketch of a house. In the center, in large letters, it said, "Housewarming brunch for Alex and Jenna." Under that, there was the address, the date, and the time. There were lines about celebrating their first home together, and about how thankful they were to everyone who helped them reach this milestone. At the bottom, it said the event would be hosted by Jenna's parents. There was no mention of me. People in the chat started to reply. There were comments about how beautiful the house looked, how proud the Blakes must be, how nice it was that Alex had this fresh start with a real support system. Nora wrote privately to me a few minutes later. She asked if I had seen it. I replied that I had. She asked if I planned to go. I looked at the screen for a long time before I answered. I wrote that I did not know yet, but that I would be near the house on that day in any case. She did not ask what I meant. She just sent a simple heart, not many words. She knew me well enough to read between the lines. In the days leading up to the brunch, Mr. Grant called again. The couple he had spoken with had seen the outside of the house and were eager. They trusted his judgment on the inside based on his notes and the area. They had made a firm offer above what I had first expected. He said they were ready to move quickly and had already visited the bank. Ms. Patel and I met once more, this time in a small room at the bank with the trust officer present. On the table there were several sets of papers, each with small tabs showing where signatures would go. I did not read every page. I had gone through the main points with her earlier, and I trusted her to keep track of the fine print. I signed in the places she indicated. The officer countersigned where needed. Each page made a soft sound as it turned. When we were done, the officer gathered the stack and said the bank would process the sale instructions and confirm the timeline. The trust money would stay under my control, ready for new directions. Ms. Patel handed me a thick envelope with my name on it. Inside, she said, were copies of key documents and a formal notice addressed to Alex and Jenna. She said that, by law, they would be given a clear period to leave the property after the sale completed. She said the notice explained the reason in plain terms and referred to the trust clauses and the public statements. I did not open the envelope there. I held it in my hand, feeling its weight, then slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Outside the bank, the air felt sharper than before. I stood for a minute near the entrance, watching people hurry by. None of them knew that a house, a life base, a story point for someone, had just changed direction quietly in a small room. On the morning of the housewarming, I woke early without needing the alarm. I dressed in simple clothes, nothing special, and made coffee. My hands were steady as I poured it. The trust folder no longer sat on the desk. It had been replaced by a smaller file with only what I needed for that day. I checked my phone. The group chat was already active, people posting pictures of food they were preparing to bring, comments about outfits, notes about parking near the house. I put the phone down, finished my coffee, and picked up my jacket. The envelope in the inside pocket made a slight sound as the fabric shifted. I locked the front door behind me and walked to my car. The drive to the neighborhood took the same amount of time as always, but it felt different. I was not going there to fix a loose rail or check a cable. I was not going there as a guest either. I was going as the person who had built the base they stood on and who now had decided where that base would go. When I turned the last corner, I saw cars lined along the street. Balloons were tied to the front fence. Through the open gate, I could see people in light clothes moving toward the backyard. Laughter floated out, mixed with the low sound of music. I parked a short distance away and switched off the engine. For a moment, I sat there, looking at the house. The same bricks, the same roof, the same front door I had once checked and rechecked for small gaps. Now it had a large sign near the entrance that said, "Welcome to our first home." I opened the car door, stepped out onto the street, and closed it gently behind me. Then I adjusted my jacket, feeling the outline of the envelope against my chest, and started walking toward the gate. People were gathered in the front yard when I reached the gate. Some held plates, some held glasses. A few faces turned toward me with polite curiosity, the way people look at a neighbor they do not quite know. I walked past them with a small nod and followed the sound of music toward the backyard. The patio was full. There were tables with food, a row of chairs, decorations hanging from the fence. At the center, Alex and Jenna stood with Roger and Elaine, talking to a circle of guests. They all looked relaxed, like the day was a smooth continuation of the photo I had seen on my phone. A few heads turned as I stepped onto the patio. One person whispered my name to another. I saw Nora near the back, standing close to the fence. Her eyes met mine, and she gave the smallest nod. Roger noticed me next. His smile tightened, and he walked over. He greeted me in a polite voice and said that this was a happy event with many guests and that it might not be the best time for difficult talks. He hinted that I should enjoy some food and then perhaps leave early. I said I was not there for the food. I said I needed to speak with Alex and Jenna about the house. My tone was quiet but firm. Roger hesitated, then stepped aside. Alex came over with Jenna beside him. He looked surprised but not pleased. He asked in a low voice why I had come without saying anything. Jenna stood close to him and kept her eyes on me. I said I would not take much of their time. I asked that we move a few steps closer to the back door, where the patio met the living room, so that we could all hear clearly. People nearby fell silent, but they did not move away. Phones were in hands, some already raised. Inside the open-plan living room, I took the envelope from my jacket and placed it on the dining table. I told them it contained a formal notice from the trustee of the house they were using. I said that trustee was me. I explained in simple terms that the house did not belong to Alex or to the Blakes. It belonged to a trust I had created years earlier. I said that I had set it up after long hours and tight months so my son would never worry about where he lived. I then said that the trust had clear conditions. One of them was that the main beneficiary would not publicly turn the person who built that support into a stranger. I said that recent posts, speeches, and comments had done exactly that. I told them that, as trustee, I had used my right to sell the property. I said the sale had been completed that morning, that the money was now under the trust's control, and that the new owners would receive the keys once the legal notice period ended. I added that, after that date, Alex and Jenna could not stay in the house. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then voices came at once. Jenna said this could not be real, that it had to be a scare tactic. Roger said I was being petty, that I was trying to punish his family on a special day. Elaine said this would make me look bad to everyone who heard about it. Alex looked at me with wide eyes and asked how I could do this. I answered each point in order. I said the notice was real, with signatures from the bank and the lawyer. I said the housewarming was built on a story where I did not exist, and that I had decided I would no longer fund that story. I said that what people thought about me was less important than what I could live with when I looked at my own face in the mirror. I told Alex that I had always been willing to share what I had, even when I had very little. I said that this was not about one caption or one speech, but about many years where my efforts were quietly taken and then given new names in public. I added that the sale money would now go to other relatives and to a fund that helped young workers get housing without having to erase the people who had stood behind them. Guests watched from the patio and doorway. Some held their phones a little lower now, but they did not put them away. The music from a speaker in the corner cut off when someone bumped it. I picked up the envelope and placed it directly in front of Alex and Jenna. I said they should read it with a calm head, and that any questions could go through Ms. Patel's office. There was nothing more to discuss here. Then I turned and walked back through the crowd. People moved aside as I passed. Nora stood near the edge of the patio. As I went by, she touched my arm once, lightly, then let go. I stepped out into the front yard, through the gate, and onto the sidewalk. At the edge of the property, a real estate sign stood in the grass, the board still blank at the top. A car pulled up, and Mr. Grant got out with a long white sticker in his hand. He greeted me softly, then walked to the sign and pressed the sticker across the board in one smooth motion. The word sold showed in clear red letters. Behind us, the voices from the house dropped into a low, broken murmur. I did not turn around to look. I watched the sticker smooth under his hand, nodded once, and then walked away down the street.